15,000 migrant children currently in government custody are being held in Border Patrol facilities that are not intended for long-term housing. The U.S. has announced plans to open a new facility to hold them temporarily near the southern border. The Department of Health and Human Services says that the facility is expected to hold about 500 children, but the surge in migrants and minors pouring across the border is becoming a political issue for the new administration. So for more on this, let's bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez. So, Camilo, to just start off with, who are these children? Who are these kids? Where are they coming from? And, how do they end up at the border?
So we know, Anne-Marie, that nearly 9,500 unaccompanied minors entered U.S. border custody in February. That is the highest figure for any February in the history of Customs and Border Protection. We know that the vast majority of these unaccompanied minors are teenagers and children from Central America's Northern Triangle, which is comprised, as you know, of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Many of these children are teenagers who flee poverty-stricken communities, including indigenous localities in Guatemala. Some of these children flee gang threats because gangs in that region are known to recruit teenagers to partake in criminal activity. We know that the region is also recovering from two devastating back-to-back hurricanes that made landfall last fall. And the country conditions have not changed in these countries for years now. And so we are seeing a sharp increase in the number of unaccompanied minors entering U.S. border custody. And unlike in the Trump administration, these children are now being allowed to enter the country, to make a case for asylum, to continue their immigration proceedings while in U.S. shelters. But the big issue right now, Anne-Marie, is that the Biden administration is struggling to find adequate bed space for these children. One, because of the sheer number of unaccompanied minors crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. But the second reason is because the U.S. Refugee Agency within the Department of Health and Human Services, which is charged with the long-term care of these minors, is struggling to find bed space because they had to reduce its COVID-era capacity to implement social distancing, and because it just does not have enough bed space for the number of children coming in. And that is why we see this massive backlog of 5,000 minors in Border Patrol facilities which are unfit to house them.
Okay, so you have these facilities that people say are unfit. Tell me about the facilities. What makes them unfit?
Sure, so let me make a distinction. Border Patrol, which is the first agency that typically takes these minors into custody, is a law enforcement agency within the Department of Homeland Security. It oversees multiple Border Patrol stations that are largely designed to detain adult migrant men. They have cinder block cells, they are jail-like, and migrants have dubbed them dog kennels and ice boxes because of the cold experience in the cells there. And so these are not adequate conditions for children. Customs and Border Protection does indeed have one big tent facility in Donna, Texas, that is specifically designed to hold unaccompanied children and families with minors. But even that facility, Anne-Marie, is designed for short-term custody, and it has been well over capacity for several weeks now, with minors having to take turns to sleep on the floor, according to lawyers, not seeing the sun in nearly a week, and showering just once in as many as 7 days. So that is the biggest concern among advocates, and frankly, for the Biden administration, that these children will endure poor conditions in these Border Patrol facilities, and that they will spend prolonged periods of time in them.
And, they're already traumatized. So the last thing you want is for them to make it into the U.S. and be sort of re-traumatized by their experiences here. The finger pointing has already started. The Biden administration is sort of arguing, hey, we just got here, and our hands are sort of tied by decisions that the Trump administration made. The Republican members of the Republican Party say, no, that's not the case at all. This is yours, Biden administration. How did the Trump administration's immigration policies impact the current situation?
That's an excellent question, because the Biden administration certainly has placed a lot of the blame on the Trump administration. For context, as you remember, Anne-Marie, during the pandemic, the Trump administration invoked this public health authority to expel most border crossers, including unaccompanied children, without allowing them to seek asylum. It expelled more than 15,000 unaccompanied minors from the U.S.-Mexico border before a judge in November ordered them to stop because he said this practice was likely illegal and that the government could not suspend the protections that Congress created for these children even during a global public health emergency. And so an appeals